This week in Texas, we talk immigration and the border. Is Texas now in lockstep with the White House after a change in administrations?
We'll be working with President Trump to secure the border as fast as we can because it can be done.
And what does it mean for undocumented immigrants living in Southeast Texas?
Right now, a lot of people are terrified. We're getting phone calls regarding orders of supervision.
We talk about the drastic shift in policy with our political insiders. And they also give their 2 cents about the state's budget. Where will the money go?
Compared to some past sessions, the House and the Senate are a little closer in terms of their priorities.
Also, we get insight into the state's coffers with Texas's top accountant, Comptroller Glenn Hagar.
A significant amount of money.
It's a new month and a new episode of This Week in Texas. Hello again and welcome to This Week in Texas. We begin with immigration and the border. The state of Texas is working with the Trump administration to secure the southern border. And already the state has announced new initiatives as the White House targets criminal undocumented immigrants. A week into the new administration, and Texas's top elected officials are stepping up those efforts along the state's border with Mexico.
We'll be working with President Trump to secure the border as fast as we can because it can be done.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says the dynamic has changed between Austin and Washington, D.C.
When Donald Trump was in the first term, pick up the phone and just call him. I mean, he is the president and he's busy, and we don't overdo that. But we can just, Greg Abbott, myself, and pick up the phone and say, Mr. President, here's what we think we can do on the border. We need your help, et cetera, et cetera. And what are you doing? How can we help you? Because we have to secure the border.
And this week, Governor Abbott announced the Texas Tactical Border Force will surge over 400 additional soldiers, as well as C-130s and Chinook helicopters, to join thousands of Texas National Guard soldiers already deployed on the border to collaborate with U.S. Border Patrol agents on the border.
So the general rule is that the federal government has broad powers of immigration, and that the states do not have any power of immigration.
Constitutional law expert Josh Blackman at the South Texas College of Law says border protection and immigration are solely the job of the federal government, but there are some exceptions. A state could declare an invasion, which Governor Abbott has done, or the federal government could ask states to help.
President Trump may actually deputize Texas and say, Texas, we want you to enforce the border because Congress won't let me do it. So actually, the federal government can then give some of their power to the state governments.
As for immigration enforcement here in Southeast Texas, we know ICE says it is doing targeted enforcement. An ICE official tells ABC 13 it is routine. But some immigration attorneys are making sure people across the migrant community know they have rights. ABC 13's Daniela Hurtado has that part of the story.
Right now, a lot of people are terrified. We're getting phone calls regarding orders of supervision.
Kim Bruno and her family have been doing immigration law in Houston for decades. As immigration enforcement continues across our area, she calls on people who don't have a legal status and may be in the process of getting their papers to always have their paperwork with them in case they get stopped. It's something Camilo Orto tells us he's already doing.
You might know what to do, but, law enforcement, they make you scared and they make you forget everything. So by the meantime, when it happens, you don't know what to answer or you know what to do.
Law enforcement agencies like representatives at the Liberty County Sheriff's Office tell ABC 13 they want people to know they are not going door-to-door knocking and checking people's immigration status. They say ICE is going after people with active warrants. Bruno says the Department of Justice and ICE are working together to expedite the removal of violent criminals who are here illegally. But that could impact family members as well.
If they are going into your home and you are a criminal or you did have a warrant or you have committed a DWI or different crimes of those natures, and they go into your home, they can now then take others as collateral. Right? Other individuals who are there, living there, who don't have documentation.
Bruno has been handing out these flyers with people's constitutional rights and her information, so people in fear of deportation can hand them to agents. As many talk about mass deportations across the nation, it's important to note that the pace of removals hasn't changed since the first of the year. Within the last year, we've already seen a high number of removals. The Department of Homeland Security data shows more than 680,000 people were removed and returned to their countries in 2024. That's more than any fiscal year since 2010. Daniela Hurtado, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Thanks to Daniela Hurtado for that report. Let's continue the immigration conversation with our political insiders, strategist Otis Evagaro and Court Kenning. Gentlemen, let's talk about immigration and the border. This is an issue that's not going anywhere for Texas, is it?
No, and nationwide. I mean, you saw President Trump assumed office last week after the swearing in and immediately got after his commitments in the campaign, deporting a number of people. And I think I've heard this morning on our station that the goal is to do 1,900 a day. The closer in, the state is looking for reimbursements for the money that we spent in the Biden administration to secure the border. And you've got now a partnership between the federal government and the state government on securing the border, and that's a great thing, I think.
Less adversarial than it was with the Biden administration.
Certainly. I mean, following the rule of law, which is to secure the border and make people go through a system and a process, and ending the or re-implementing the stay in your country while you await your application status.
Otis, you were just down in the Rio Grande Valley. Your thoughts about what's happening right now?
Yeah, I was just down there with the Rio Grande Valley partnership, and one of the days it's always on border security and all that good stuff. And I was just amazed by all of the people we saw crossing the Rio Grande River and all the fentanyl that was coming in and all these make-believe stories that we keep hearing. You didn't see it at the border. And yes, the immigration story is not going to go away. The border security is not going to go away. What I will say that is helping, I think, on our side, speaking as a Democrat, is, you have President Trump signing executive orders that are simply just unconstitutional when it comes to birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment clearly states, if you are born here, you are a citizen. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to tackle immigration. It seems like where there's going to be more noise is going to be in the courts and the legal battles and not actually securing the border. So we'll have to see.
So I noticed that some of the bills that have been filed already, you talk about reimbursement. The lieutenant governor told us they are going to seek reimbursement. Some bills have been filed to seek reimbursement. Is that realistic to think that they'll get billions back from the federal government?
Well, you're not going to get it unless you ask for it. And Texas spent a large amount of money out of the rainy day fund in order to do this. Over and above what the lawmakers were allowing at the time. It was outside of session that this all started. The governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker working together on that. I mean, it's like a disaster that has happened. Natural disasters happen. They're kind of applying that same type of logic and getting these reimbursements. I mean, again, you're not going to get the money unless you ask for it, and we now have a friendly administration that hopefully we can get that. I mean, in the inauguration, if you remember, the President Trump was singling out Governor Abbott for his work on the border. So that's great. That's a great partnership there.
So one thing is to secure the border and to enforce immigration law by deportation or other rules. Another is to fix the immigration system altogether. Do politicians either in Texas or in Washington really want to fix it?
No. And I can tell you that because, again, we had a solution before Trump came in with one of the most conservative senators in the United States Congress, and Donald Trump said no. Now, Court did say last time they're going to come with a better bill. I'm still waiting for that language. There's a lot of executive orders that were signed, but to actually fix the immigration problem, presidents have had a hard time doing that, right? And so it's going to be very interesting to see how Trump navigates the Senate, how he navigates, the U.S. House and all of these things. But the answer to your question, Tom, is no, because there's never been a solution to fix our immigration problem from the Republican side. It's always been deportation, deportation, deportation. Well, what do we do with our dreamers? What do we do with people who are coming here, quote unquote, legally? What about those things? People have been talking about these things. We have people on social media crying about how I was in line, I was ready to do this, and now all of a sudden, boom, it's been shut off because there's a new administration. So they're going to have to figure this thing out.
But you can't be surprised. He promised all this. And yes, we do need to fix the underlying immigration issue on how one applies and gets into the country. We do have needs for like H-1B visas where specific expertise is needed in the country to bring those folks in. And so it's a rule of law thing that Trump is applying. And I believe that there was a piece of legislation in Congress that already fast-tracked and it was on its way to the president's desk on immigration. So, I mean, again, we go back to the issue. This is what he promised. And historical numbers voted for him in the Valley. And they're going, you have Hispanics that we naturally go toward Democrats going toward Republicans. And it's because of this rule of law issue, I think.
You agree or disagree with that?
No, I completely disagree. I mean, I haven't seen the bill. I need to go read it. But again, the bill that we had before Trump came was a bipartisan bill that Democrats and Republicans were going to vote on. And this included more immigration judges because of the backlog we have, more technology for the border, more things that will also help immigration and help those folks who are here legally and just waiting in line to get their fair shake at this. And so, you know, the rule of law is interesting because, again, you have a president who just signed an executive order that's essentially stripping away birthright citizenship, and the Constitution affords birthright citizenship, right? The American people didn't sign up for fascism, autocracy, or an oligarchy. They signed up for the Republic of America, and that's a democracy. And you have to go through the legislative process. You have to follow the Constitution. That's literally the oath Donald Trump took on January 20th, and you already see him breaking it.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. When we come back, we will talk about the state's budget and just how much lawmakers have to put toward the border, education, and infrastructure. Welcome back. From school choice to teacher raises and vouchers to property tax relief, Texas lawmakers laid out what they plan to do with the budget. Political experts say the allocated amount of money shows they have bigger plans than ever for school choice. ABC 13's Nick Notario explains what these proposals could mean for schools and for taxes.
The fight to pass school choice legislation heated up this week, not from lawmakers passing a bill, but what was in budget proposals. Both the House and Senate rolled out their plans this week. Each wants to give $1 billion to private school vouchers. That's twice as much as the failed proposal 2 years ago. Rice University political science professor Mark Jones says after pro-school choice lawmakers won elections, lawmakers could try to add more students.
The only question right now is what form that school choice legislation takes in terms of how expansive it is.
There's money for public schools, too. In fact, teachers could get raises. In the Senate proposal, most teachers would get $4,000 more. For rural educators, it would be $10,000, raises teachers missed out on 2 years ago.
That got caught up in the school choice debate and never passed because the governor had linked it to passing school choice legislation.
The proposals also include $3.5 billion for property tax relief. Jones says lawmakers would either increase the homestead exemption or send money to districts to decrease school taxes. A budget item that may not help renters.
The only way to help renters is, in theory, giving property tax relief to apartment owners who, in theory, if they felt so inclined, would pass it along to the renters.
The more than $330 billion budget proposals aren't a done deal. Lawmakers have until June.
Although compared to some past sessions, the House and the Senate are a little closer in terms of their priorities.
Which means items like school choice, teacher raises, and property tax cuts could be coming this session. Nick Notario, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Thanks to Nick for that report. No, the state of Texas has close to $195 billion to spend over the next 2 years, and there is more than a $23 billion carryover from the last 2-year budget. For more on the money and what it means to Texas taxpayers, we sat down with the state's top accountant, Comptroller Glenn Hagar.
Yeah, to the average Texas one, the Texas economy continues to grow. If you look at the other states around the nation, several of them don't have cash carryover balances. Some of them, unfortunately, are negative cash carryover balances, where all states 2 years ago had budgetary surpluses. So that alone tells you that overall the state economy continues to grow just in relation to our peers across the nation. You know, every morning when you wake up in Texas, there's roughly another 1,600 people that call Texas home every day. I mean, that's just hard to imagine. And so therefore, the priorities of the legislature need to focus on, if you have another 1,600 people, some of those move here, some of that is natural growth, trying to continue to focus on roads, water infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, health care, the basic things that you and I expect that come with that growth. And so a large portion of this current cash carryover balance is really a result of the economy continuing to grow, but at a modest level compared to where we were several years ago, which was part of the lead up to that historical cash carryover balance. And this one is a result of modest growth, but also a large percent of it was still a carryover from 2 years ago.
$195 billion is a lot of money on its face.
A significant amount of money.
But it goes fast, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. When you have a state that is literally the 8th largest economy in the world, 30 million people, 254 counties, 12 economic regions. You have one move, whether that is last session, for example, because leadership has talked about this. How do we put an additional amount of our taxpayer dollars to ensure that we are fortifying and ensuring we have readily dispatchable energy on our electric grid? That was $5 billion 2 years ago. If they did that again, boom, that's a big piece of money. If you add in funding to public education, as they were going to last session, but then enacting legislation did not pass, so part of that $24 billion is that $4.5 billion that was intended to go in that direction. Well, now we're getting to where that's two big pieces and two big moves. So, you know, a big state, it doesn't take a lot, and it ends up being significant amounts of money.
Especially when you talk about the number of people moving here.
That's right.
And the stresses on the infrastructure, whether you're talking about electricity, water, roads.
And that's the reason I talk a lot about infrastructure, because when we're here as the CFO of the state, we're not just talking about a 2-year budget, but we're also talking about a longer term. What is the glide path that we want Texas on for future generations? And that's our responsibility, not just a 2-year, but a longer outlook for the next decade plus. And those things, you know, if we all look at and talk about a road project, for example, when is that road project ever going to be finished? Well, as soon as it's finished, guess what? There's repairs, just like it is on your and my household, whether it's automobiles, there's tires that have to be bought every so years to continue to keep up the maintenance. And the same thing with infrastructure, roads, water, electric grids, broadband capability. So all these things continue to keep an investment. And that's one reason that I talk constantly about how do we make sure we keep up our infrastructure. And if we do that, the Texas economy continues to grow, which is what is most important to the average working family. What do they want to do? They want to have a job, they want to be able to pay their bills, and they want future generations to be better off than they are.
But given inflation over the last 2 years, that $195 billion rather, today is not $195 billion 2 years ago, is it?
That's exactly right, and that's one of the points that I continue to make, is that 2 years ago I made the point that a portion of those revenues with that historical cash surplus was because you and I were paying more with 40-year high inflation for an average item than we did the year before. And so what that also meant at 6 1/4 sales tax, which is the bulk of the revenues into the state treasury, is sales tax at 58% of all tax collections. So therefore the point being is, if you pay more money came in the treasury. But it also meant that average employee who works for the state of Texas to keep the economy going, the law enforcement person that is out there trying to keep our community safe, they also have higher costs. So trying to, whether it's give pay raises or the asphalt for the roads or the pipes for the water infrastructure, those things cost more. And today, unfortunately, while inflation is not going up significantly, it is modest, it hasn't gone down. And so we all have a higher cost of living than we did just a few years ago.
Anything else it's important to add that puts this in context?
Well, I think what's most important is just for everybody to realize the Texas economy continues to grow. That is a positive. We're blessed to be in the state of Texas, but the legislature has a large number of tasks that they have ahead of them, and as long as they keep focused on making sure Texas continues to grow, we're going to be better off as a state compared to most other places.
It's like the old saying, it's not how much you make, it's how you spend it.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, do you save wisely? Do you plan for a rainy day? You know, we're blessed with a large economic stabilization fund or a rainy day fund, which is our state savings account. But how do we make sure we continue to plan for those future dates? Because, you know, the Texas economy is very tied to the global economy. We are over 20% of all the exports out of the entire United States comes out of this state, and we're right at 10% of the whole U.S. economy. So I make that point just to go, we're very tied. And the point being is things that happen in other parts of the world can either have a push or a drag effect on our economy. There will one day be an economic downturn globally. There will be a recession. We don't know when, we don't know the cause, but the point is, you're always good to save up for a rainy day.
When we come back, our political insiders rejoin us to talk about the state budget and where they think the money should go. Welcome back to This Week in Texas. I'm joined once again by our political insiders, Democrat strategist Otis Evogar, Republican strategist Court Kenning. Let's talk about the budget. Where do you see the money going, first of all? And then I'll ask you later, where would you like to see the money going?
Well, the Senate has already put out a budget, and the House is going to do one too. I think they've got committee assignments maybe coming next week, and so those kind of things are happening already. I mean, we know that education is going to be first in front, and that takes up a lion's share. That and healthcare take up a lion's share of the budget. I mean, you're talking about after education and health, you've got maybe 20% left to spend in the budget. And thankfully, the state of Texas is in good financial shape right now. But you're going to see those dollars spent on education through this voucher bill and additional funds towards schools. You're going to still see border security issues and money. They're not going to cut that off totally with the new health administration on that. So, that's really where these dollars are going to go. And then you got law enforcement and those kind of things like that, roads and infrastructure. So it's another day.
$195 billion goes fast, doesn't it?
It does. And where you'll see this money spent from what you see for the budget priorities is super simple. Education, the border, and property taxes. You're going to see the lieutenant governor attempt to lower property taxes from the leftover money that we have. I chuckle because, again, a lot of property owners did not see a decrease in property taxes, and it looks like they're going to take that equation again and try to do something else with it in hopes of reducing property taxes. So we'll see. But that's where the money's going to go. And then another thing that I think that people are going to surprise to see where the money is going to go and we're trying to alleviate is also housing affordability. You see Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, where I agree with him on is that, listen, housing and the prices here in Texas are sky high. We've got to do something to bring these prices down where it's more affordable to live in these major urban markets. But even now in the suburban areas, you're starting to see that hike as well, too. So that's where you'll see the money go, and it won't be surprising. And then, whatever else somebody can find some money for their parks and their districts and name a highway after somebody and all that good stuff.
And that's, like the federal government, they have the little tags on the budget on their own projects. You've got that in Texas too. I mean, you've got riders on the bills, and you may get a rider put on the budget, but may not be funded. There's a lot of horse trading going on behind the scenes, and it's a typical legislative process that you don't want to see sometimes.
Well, and Glenn Hagar mentioned that there's a $23 billion plus surplus, but that a lot of that money is already spoken for because they kind of already earmarked that money for education last time and didn't spend it. Do you see education getting the kind of funding that educators want to see?
Last session and special sessions, it was the carrot and the stick. And so I think you're going to have that in order to be able to get some people to swallow the hard pill of a voucher bill. The numbers are going to be incredibly tight when it comes down to a vote, and those kind of things like that, those sweeteners of more education dollars to public education while having a voucher is probably going to be the one that rules the day.
It's going to have to. I mean, politically, forget the governing part. Politically, they can't afford another session where they do not increase teacher pay, increase the basic allotment for per pupil, per student spending, and all of that good stuff. You've already seen this happen in the Senate. SB 2, which is the voucher bill, has already been out there. It's not tied to teacher increase or basic allotment increase, which is something that we've talked about, how it'll be two separate bills this session where it was one bill last session. So the appetite to separate those two and making sure that education is well funded, as funded as can be with Republicans in charge, is definitely there. And like TaCourt said, there's going to be a lot of horse trading going on because you're going to need some of these rural Republicans in the House to vote for that voucher bill. That bill is not done. I mean, I think a lot of people think it is. It's not, because a lot of those rural Republicans haven't had constituents who are employed by their ISDs call them come March, April. We know how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, Otis has said previously on the show is that in a lot of those districts, it is the largest employer. And they're organized,
right.
And so the phone calls will be going in and letters and things like that, and you got to listen to your constituents. Now, granted, you got to dance with the one who brung you.
That's right.
And that's the governor, and he's expecting that vote, and that's how a lot of these members got there, is the support from the governor and his supporters as well.
So last session, Dade Phelan really didn't bring it to the floor the way the governor wanted it brought to the floor. Will that happen with Dustin Burrows, given that he essentially was elected to be House Speaker with a majority of Democrats?
I think yes. I think you're going to see that bill come to the floor. I mean, Speaker Phelan is no longer Speaker Phelan because he didn't bring that bill to the floor, and other issues that didn't jive with the other two members of the 3-member leadership team. And so that bill is going to come to the floor. And to Otis's point, building off what he said earlier, is that, yes, Lieutenant Governor got his bill out, but that is a negotiating point. That is the beginning. That is what he wants. He knows he's going to have to come around and had some sweeteners to it.
Right, and the governor's already said that the $1 billion that the House and the Senate have brought forward in their budget proposal is a nice start, right? The governor's looking for more money for the voucher program, and if you look in Senate Bill 2, eventually it's going to get to $4 billion spent in 4 years, so it's going to be interesting. One last note to add, Tom, with spending on education, one of the things I would lament saying as well, too, is that we've got to figure out more funding for HBCUs in Texas. From Houston Tellison to Texas Southern to Prairie View to Paul Quinn, we have 17 HBCUs in the state of Texas. They are not receiving funding. That's one of the things that the Texas Legislative Black Caucus is looking forward to. Finance Committee in the Senate, Appropriations in the House is getting more funding for HBCUs. So look out for that as well, too.
And after this program airs, the governor will be giving his State of the Union address, or State of the State address, excuse me, on Sunday.
It is a union. Texas is a whole country,
exactly
right?
So, I mean, we'll know a lot more then. He'll declare some things that are emergency items, which then will fast track those items so that they don't have to go around follow the rules that everything else is.
And certainly we'll focus on his priorities on next week's episode when you join us again. We'll be right back with more This Week in Texas. That does it for this episode of This Week in Texas. Thanks for joining us. You can watch all of our previous episodes on demand at abc13.com or wherever you stream ABC 13. For all of us here, I'm Tom Abrams. Have a great week, and until we see you again, be kind to one another.